Hello everyone, my name is George Bina and I would like to welcome you to another webinar on Oxygen XML. I invited Mark Baker from Analecta Communications to discuss about implementing XML authoring not only for technical authors but also for everybody in an organization. So the webinar is called the business case for form-based authoring. Our agenda today starts with a quick introduction, then Mark will discuss these subjects, and I also will present an example of simple data authoring. We'll have a question and answer section at the end, and then a quick overview of a few of the upcoming events, webinars, and conferences that you can meet us. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can either use Twitter and mark them with the OxygenXML hashtag, or please use the questions panel from your GoToWebinar interface. And you can also ask questions anytime during the webinar. I will take these questions, and I also have my colleague Alex, and we will either respond to you privately or ask Mark each question. So now let me make Mark presenter. Hi, Mark.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for showing up for this. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I've been trying to create forms-based authoring interfaces for structured writing for, I think, probably about 15 or 16 years now, and the tools for it just keep getting better, so it really helps. So I want to talk a little bit about why structured authoring. I don't think I really have to sell it to this audience, but it's worth putting it in perspective. It's interesting to note that WYSIWYG as a method for creating content has been questioned for quite some time. Jakob Nielsen in 2005 was saying rest in peace WYSIWYG, because in his view WYSIWYG forces far too much manual labor on users. It's essentially saying you get a blank screen and you have to fill everything in, and that's actually considerably more difficult for the average person. And so he was really calling for a step away from WYSIWYG towards what he called a more functional interface. And when he did this, this had nothing to do with the web particularly, or structured content. This is a general comment on interfaces. And of course, WYSIWYG hasn't gone away in things like Word and PowerPoint, but I think it is interesting to note that there are applications which have definitely moved to a more functional interface. A good example that comes to mind is a tax preparation package. Some of the earliest attempts to do that were basically just showing you the tax form, but any modern tax preparation package now takes the form of an interview, where it goes through with all kinds of specific one-at-a-time questions, walks you through step by step, and creates the tax form in the background. So that would be an example of an application that's moved away from WYSIWYG towards the more kind of functional interface that Nielsen's talking about. So the problems with WYSIWYG aren't solely related to structured authoring, and actually the reason it's problematic in structured authoring actually is reflected in ways that it's problematic in other things. Karen Grain has been declaring WYSIWYG dead for a little while now, and she is, sorry about that. I don't know if you're seeing the pop-ups from, I've got something running in the background that I didn't think I had. So I hope you're not seeing the pop-ups, but I suspect you are. Karen McGrain says, we are in a war between giant unstructured blobs of content and clean, well-structured fields of content that have metadata attached. Rachel Andrew in her blog talking about why WYSIWYG editors suck. The obvious problem is what you see is what you get where exactly, which, in other words, if you're putting content out in multiple places, which of those places is the WYSIWYG view that I'm getting? They promote thinking about style rather than content, but the real quote that I think is important here is, for a content administrator, a WYSIWYG editor is actually a very poor way for them to add content to the website. They end up with a big area and need to work out what to add in order for the content to be formatted as the designer intended. So this is actually creating overhead for the author rather than making their life simple. And Jeff Eaton gives the same message, that the current editing interfaces are sending the wrong message. Any editing interface consists of a set of affordances. This is the things that clue people into what they're doing, and gives them a sense of, are they doing it right? How do I accomplish things? And when we present these editing interfaces that are primarily visual, we're saying what matters is the visual, not the structure, but the visual. So essentially you set up a feedback cycle that says, if it looks right, it is right. And that is not the message that we want to be sending to people. At this point, I'd like to ask George to start the first poll. And basically what we want to find out in this poll is, are you trying, or would you like to be able to get structured content from colleagues in your organization, people other necessarily than full-time professional authors? So we'll give you a minute or two to answer the poll.
One question, Mark, was if the slides will be made available after the presentation.
We can certainly do that, yes.
Okay. Okay, I see that the majority voted, so I can close this and share the results. Okay. Can you see the results?
I can see, yes, so, okay. 95% people would like to be able to get structured content from other people in the organization other than professional authors. Good, because we wouldn't have had much more to say if it had gone the other way. So now I'd like to start the second poll and basically ask, how difficult is it to get that kind of structured content that you want from your colleagues?
I think we should have also a majority of people already voted for this, so let me close this and share the results.
Okay, so what we're seeing, not unexpectedly, is that almost everybody is having to do a cleanup, at least. 41% are just getting blobs, and 54% are getting some structure, but they have to do cleanup on it. So clearly this is a significant problem in terms of being able to move structured content around an enterprise or push it out to the web. If every time a piece of content is created, cleanup has to happen. So there's very clearly a need for a better way to get structured content out of ordinary people. So the alternative, of course, we need to get structured writing. We need to be able to add metadata to the content to describe its role and its meaning and its structure, in order so that we can reuse it, that we can package it, that we can provide automation of organization and linking, we can exchange content, we can validate content, and reduce the burden on the authors, because right now clearly it is a burden on the authors. What we really have to do is find a more effective way to get that content from them. So let's look a little bit at the limitations of the current method. As Rick Yagodovich has noted recently, author experience is becoming a significant issue. It's not something traditionally in the structured industry that we've thought about terribly much. We've really have focused to a very large extent on getting the structures right, so that we can publish content, getting the structures right so that we can manage content and reuse content, and then we have gone to the authors and say, here, can you please give us this markup? And we really haven't given them great tools for doing that. We've tended to ask them either for this, raw XML. You know, all the geeks on the call are now going, and everybody else is going, huh? Now, this is clearly not something you want to show people or ask them to provide you with. But the other choice up to now has been WYSIWYG. We're asking authors to separate content from formatting, and we give them an editing view that shows formatting and hides structure. So there's really a mismatch between what we're asking for and what we're providing, with the further problem that the WYSIWYG view actually doesn't hide structure completely. So here I have a piece of content. It's actually written in DocBook. It's one of the chapters from my book. And it nicely illustrates the kind of problems that you have and how this WYSIWYG view really isn't hiding the structure completely. Have you noticed right now I've got a horizontal cursor, not something you'd normally see in Word, but it's indicating that we're in a boundary. And if I hit page up, we're at another boundary, and page up again, we're in another boundary. And so there's actually a box within a box within a box here, and what I can do at each point differs depending on what box I'm in. So if I hit enter, I've got the option to split a list item, and I've got a whole bunch of other things I can do. And right now I've just put a whole bunch of XML element names in the author space. But let's suppose I'm trying to come in here and add something to the list. So I click and I get here. Looks like I'm after the list. And this is what I get, split section. So now as an author, I'm really forced to think about the underlying structure of the XML, which I can't see. So the WYSIWYG view is looking as much like a Word interface as it can, but it really can't operate like a Microsoft Word interface because there's something else going on underneath. And Oxygen does a really good job of telling me where I am. I don't know how you could do this better in a WYSIWYG view. It tells me here exactly where I am. It tells me here exactly where I am. When I hit enter, I get a list of my choices. It's even sophisticated enough to know that when I hit enter here, when I hit enter here, I might want to split the list item and I might want to split the paragraph. So this is a really sophisticated take on how you do a WYSIWYG over XML, but the XML does keep showing through. So the problems we've seen is there's the where am I problem. In XML, one thing is inside another. You have boxes inside boxes. Word doesn't work like that. So right away, you're having to worry about where am I positioned in this document, even though I can't see the elements that I'm positioned in. There's the what's allowed here problem. I can't tell without getting in the right place and hitting enter what are the elements that I can insert here. So you get a frequent complaints from authors. I hear this all the time. Why won't it let me create X here? And the answer is, well, you need to hit the down arrow one time and it will. Things like this. There's the what's required here problem because you start with a blank sheet and you can hit enter at the top, and depending on what DTD or schema you're using, you may see a few choices or many choices. If you're using DocBook, for instance, no matter where you hit enter, you will get many, many choices because DocBook is just that big and flexible. So what's required of me in this context is often difficult for the person to understand. And of course, if they can't tell what's required of them, they fall back on what does it look like. And then you get content that's either a big blob or that requires a lot of cleanup. There's the am I done yet problem. Again, I'm looking at a blank sheet. I don't know exactly all the things that are expected of me. So am I finished? Have I done everything you wanted me to do? And then there's the what went wrong problem, because the WYSIWYG view will highlight an XML error if you make one. It tries very hard to not let you make them, but there are sometimes they will occur. And it's very, very difficult then to even tell where it is, where you are, how do I fix it. So the more we could do to prevent XML errors, the better life will be. So I want to put up another poll now to ask which of these techniques you use, because what I've seen with professional authors and my own use of these tools is that what professional authors typically do is flip around from one view to another. So I'd like to know, in your own work, do you use one view alone, or are you switching back and forth?
Okay, I'll close this now. And here are the results.
Okay, so we can see that only 7% are using WYSIWYG alone. 70% of you are switching back and forth. 24% are using raw XML alone, which of course is not something that I'm sure anybody expects of anybody in the wider enterprise community to do. So the fact that only 7% are using WYSIWYG interfaces alone seems a pretty clear indication that this is not really meeting our needs. And if we feel the need to switch back and forth, what do we think that the other people in the enterprise are going to feel when we show them these interfaces? So what's the solution? Well, if you haven't guessed by now, the solution is forms-based authoring. This is how we get structured data from ordinary people. Always has been. We deal with forms every day. So when the government wants to get a huge amount of structured data about your income and your spending and the deductions that you're entitled to, it gives you a form. We want to ship anything, we have a form. We want to order something, you fill out a form. So we actually, in the world at large, have very, very high levels of success in getting highly structured data from ordinary people by means of forms. We know this works in the general case. And forms aren't entirely new to authoring either. We have had this kind of form for quite a long time. It generally has backed by a relational database, so they have individual fields like title and author, which are directly corresponding to relational database fields. And then you have, for the general text, you have a blob field. So this kind of thing, because this is just plain text within the database record, obviously can't handle very complex text structures in a way that we can easily publish. We also have examples that use unstructured HTML. This is a screen grab from my blog, which is, of course, like everybody else's blog, is done in WordPress. And so here we have some buttons to create HTML. And of course, we all know what happens when you give users those kinds of interfaces. They create nasty, unstructured blobs that look right on one screen and fall apart as soon as you try to do anything else with them. So we've tried this. We know it's not a really satisfactory solution. And it certainly doesn't give us a way to handle this kind of structured data in a way that is going to be processable and reusable and something we can reliably query and use in different ways. So I'm going to start the demo of the forms-based authoring. I'm going to show just actually a few of the capabilities that Oxygen now has to do this, but I want to highlight the fact that it will separate content from formatting and is going to show structure, not formatting. It's going to provide the correct affordances in terms of asking people for the thing we really want, show how we can create complex text using this method, and how we have a better hiding of XML and a better solution to the where am I, the what's allowed, the what's required, and the am I done yet problems. So my sample is for a knowledge base article. A knowledge base article is something that is quite typically created by someone who's not a full-time professional author. They are generally, their job is to solve problems and answer phone calls. But from time to time, they need to create knowledge base articles to cover some new problem that's been discovered. If you've worked with knowledge base articles very much, you'll know that they are often frequently missing important pieces of information, things that people forgot to write down when they created the article. One particular one is log messages, where people forget to give the log file name. I've seen that over and over again. So here we have a forms-based approach to creating a knowledge-based article. It starts with the title. You can see that I have turned the whole background light blue so that only the areas where we want people to type are editable. And for things like the name of the operating system this occurs on, we have a drop-down. So we can pick from the values that are provided in the schema. If I want to add another OS, I have a button that lets me do that. So I can go in and say this problem also occurs on Mac OS version 10. Same thing here with the products this affects. So this affects the widget product version 4.2, widget pro 4.0. I can add another one if I want to. So I'm getting the affordances here that I can add another product. It's asking me, inviting me to do that. Everything is labeled according to what is being asked for. These labels are human language labels. They're not tag names. Some of them do correspond to tag names, but that's incidental. They can be anything. Now we have a list of symptoms. So here I mentioned log message. You often have the log file name is missing. So here we've created structure to ask for a log file name. What is the log message? And then we have an occurrence. So does this occur once, occasionally, frequently, always? So now people are being prompted to provide this information. Sequence, when does it occur? What's the trigger event? That's something I've often found missing from a knowledge-based article. It will give you the repetition and the sequence, but it doesn't tell you what the trigger event is for that sequence. So I have an error message here. Here I have a button that's reminding me that I can provide an occurrence. Occurrence isn't a required element, but I have the affordance that's prompting me to create one. So I can click that, and I get this, and then I can say this is occasionally happening before I begin, which is unlikely, but. And now if I decide I don't want that occurrence, I have a button to take it away. If I come down here, I'm still within the symptoms box, and you can see I've got a box that is telling me I'm in the symptoms section. So the where am I problem is handled by that box. And I can now add a new symptom by clicking a button. And I get prompted here for the log message. And I can put any kind of affordance I want, any kind of prompt I want here, either on top of it or within it. So this is actually an element name showing through, but we have the capability to replace that with other text as well. And I think that may be the case in the demo that George is going to show in a moment. Here is where we get to the complex text. So here I have the cause, and it's just a description. So I may want to add a paragraph to this description. I have a button to do that. I may want to add a code block. I can do that. I can add lists. So here I've got a list already. I can add an item to the list by clicking the button. And the same thing in the resolution section. Here I have a procedure. I can add a step to the procedure. I can't type very well, but I can add things to the list simply by clicking on the buttons. So all the affordances of what is available to me, what I'm expected to do, is all now on screen, part of the form. I haven't had to go anywhere to any other views, even to the toolbar. It's all here for me. One of the things that I really want to stress about this is when it comes to forms, you want to create the right form for the right job for the right person. So this is something we might show to the tech support staff, just lets them create stuff. But I may then want to have more editing controls available to me for maybe somebody who's in charge of sort of cleaning these things up. I can change my form view by changing the style, because the form is created by a CSS style sheet over the XML. I can simply change this, and now I can add a step in the middle. I can remove that step. I can remove paragraphs, add paragraphs. So I can add all these different kinds of options. And as I said, this is all done by CSS and some actions programmed in Oxygen. So I don't want you to get the idea that this is what forms look like. Forms can look like many different things, and so I'm going to hand it over to George at this point, unless anybody has a question that want to ask right now, but otherwise hand it over to George, and he will show you a very different looking form.
Thank you, Mark. I do not see any question directly related to what you just presented, but I just want to remind everyone that you can ask questions at any time. So you don't need to wait for the dedicated questions and answer section at the end. And while I present, Mark will be able to see all your questions, so he can also reply directly to your questions while I will show this example. Okay, so what I wanted to show is actually a challenge that I received at some point to provide an example of creating an interface to allow easy editing for data. And of course, you cannot do a very easy edit interface for any data document. So what I asked for was a description of the problem. And the problem was we need to have a topic with a title, a short description, and a number of sections. Each section should have, again, a title, a body for content, for putting their content, and a writer's note. And the content should be, the body should be a code block, and the writer's note should be a draft comment. So you can, of course, do that with a standard data topic, but it will not be easy. While creating a CSS style sheet to render a data document like this, which is just a title, short description, and the topic body, right? But from someone that doesn't know data, he just see here that he can enter a title, and now you can see also that I can match on the empty element to provide a different background color for the title element. I can put a label matching or adding a before pseudo element matching on title before. So as soon as I type title, the background changes, kind of showing me that I'm on the right path. The red like background tells me that I need to enter more information here. So now here I can add this description. And then what I see here is that I have, it says use plus to add a new section. So now if I trigger this action, I get an entire section added. But what I actually have here is a title, a code block, and a draft comment. But from the outer point of view, it sees section title, body, and it says enter content or whatever description we want to put for that writer, and then enter writer notes here. So he can just enter a section title, go back here and enter the content, you know, and put the content here and write some notes. And now he has the option to enter another section after this or a section at the beginning. So he can enter another section, or and for each section you have also the delete action, so you can quickly delete that. But this interface basically allows someone to write such a simplified data topic without actually knowing much about data, knowing maybe anything about data. Now you don't need to put them in front of the full Oxygen interface. On our website we have under resources Oxygen SDKs, we have here the author component for standalone Java, the author component which provides the authoring support from Oxygen as a component. And then we have a sample that I just modified a little to handle this type of document. So now I have a very simple application reusing the same configuration, everything that I developed in Oxygen. I have a very simple application with only open save, cut and paste, undo, redo, spell checking, and search support. where I publish exactly the same interface, so that people will just see this and not many hundreds of actions that they do not actually need, right? And they can use the same actions and so on. And of course, the same thing can work also on the web. And here it's the same component in with the travel guide example, but this time this component is placed in Safari, right? So if you are familiar maybe with our samples from Oxygen on the forums, you can see that this also in Oxygen, and the same functionality is available basically within the browser. So not only that you can develop a very simple interface, but you can deliver that either in a very simple application or just provide a link to the user, and he will be able to get access to these forms and all these kind of forms and text combined interface directly within the browser. One of the questions was we received was related to not seeing the structure, but the point Mark tried to make was not that the structure is not necessarily visible, because you can also have different levels where you can put from full tags with attributes, full tags, block tags, inline tags, partial tags. You have a number of levels from no tags to full tags with attributes when you can make the XML tag, the XML elements available within the user interface. The point Mark tried to make was you don't need to talk to these people, people that can create content in an XML language. They don't need to know that this is a code block. They care about this as body. That's what they understand that they need to enter. They don't need to know that this is a draft comment. These are the writer's notes. These are their notes, right? So let's see if we got other comments, other questions. One question is, how would you perform a large copy paste into the form field? Mark, do you want me to respond to this, or do you have some comment on this?
Yes, I think that one of the points I made earlier was you want to use different forms for different people. So there are some kind of large cut and paste operations that if you're going to do structure-aware cut and paste operations, you probably do need to know a little bit more about what's going on underneath. So you probably, for other people, want to provide more form-oriented ways of doing editing. They may not be necessarily as efficient, but you might be able to do things like giving people up and down buttons to move things up and down, rather than having them try and cut and paste a big chunk of a form, for instance. But if you had, if that major surgery was being done by a professional author, then they're probably much more comfortable with the tools. I think it comes down to, you can add, it's not just about adding a new appearance. It's also about controlling the tool set. So because you can put the buttons on the form that can do an amazing variety of things, you can provide each different person with a tool set appropriate to their job and to their skills, so that they can do basic operations with the form controls you provide in the context of the one job you're asking them to do with this form. So it's not about can we replicate every kind of edit operation you might want to do in one form. That's not really what forms-based authoring is about. Forms-based authoring is about being specific to a task, giving you specific tools for a specific task. So we don't want to get into providing a view that lets you start cutting and pasting arbitrary chunks of content. You want to keep the selection mechanism oriented to the form and that kind of thing.
But even Oxygen has a feature that we call smart paste, and that basically looks into the clipboard for an HTML content, and the Office applications, browsers, and so on, they place into the clipboard HTML content when you copy. And then Oxygen converts that to XHTML, runs that through an XSLT transformation that converts XHTML to data or to docbook or to TEI, and then inserts that into the document. This smart page support does not care that your current view of the XML document is a form-based view. As Mark presented earlier, he can choose between different CSS style sheets to present the document differently. So the smart page support should work the same no matter what view you use. So even if you view the document, the XML document, through a form-based interface, that should also work. And now we provide these defaults for data and docbook and TEI and XHTML, but of course you can create, you can use the same mechanism to create smart support for your own document format. Okay. Once the form is created, do authors have to use Oxygen, or they can use a different XML editor? These forms are created through a CSS style sheet. So that CSS style sheet will direct Oxygen to use either a combo box, a label, a date picker, an action, a button, and so on. Another tool will not show this, but other tools have their own ways to present the XML document in user-friendly ways or not. So what you actually have is the XML data. That's important. That's what you create. And what Oxygen provides is just a view over that XML data, a view that allows you to change the data to different interfaces. And one of them is, one of the things is that it allows you to create these form-like interfaces. But it's, even for this document, if you look at this, I can, this matches actually data, this specific CSS style sheet based on this attribute revision equals quick. But otherwise, if I change this, it switches back to the data type, the standard data CSS in documents. So you can see this with the default data CSS, and if the revision is added back, then the rev attribute is added back, then it switches to this particular quick topic view where the document is presented with this rendering. But the document is the same. The source of the document is the same.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important point to note, that it's giving you this interface without changing what's going on underneath. You're still creating XML underneath, and so it's completely portable. I think I've been finding ways to create forms-based interfaces since the mid-90s. I think I remember doing a system where we used a combination of Visual Basic and SGML to create a forms-based interface for authoring content, and it worked very well. but it was quite expensive. Took a lot of programming time and a lot of database work to create the form and get it working properly. What I really love about this system is it is mostly just done with definition of some actions in Oxygen and with CSS. So you can create and edit the forms very quickly, very simply, and that means you can provide the form for each different person. And a lot of the layout of the form is still being driven by the underlying XML. So you're not having to worry about how to add pieces to what's being displayed and all those kinds of things you'd have to worry about if you were writing a pure forms application. The XML underlying it is actually driving the display, and so you just click, and what that add button is doing is simply inserting some XML into the document, and then that's being styled, and it comes up in form view. So you're not actually creating any more form, you're just creating a bit more XML. So that it's so much less expensive and so much more flexible than any way that I've ever found to create forms in the past. And that would include, the kind of thing you do in a CMS where you're creating database tables, right? You don't have to create any database, change any database structures to do this. It's all being captured in the XML.
Another question. What happens if someone tries to open a document with elements that don't have form controls? Are they displayed using the CSS but not editable, or not permitted to be opened?
I actually think that's one of the really neat things, is that you can determine that. You could, if you wanted to have somebody edit part of a document, they'd only see the part that they're allowed to edit. So that's actually a significant problem in many workflows, is you want to give people the whole but only let them edit parts, and this is a pretty effective way of doing that.
There are basically two properties in the CSS that allow you to control that. One is display none, so display column none when you hide something, and another is the editable property, where you can say this is editable or not. So the document will be opened and the CSS will be used, but in that CSS you can decide if everything that you don't match with your rules will be will have the editable property false, and then it will be read-only but still rendered through the styles from the CSS, or you can decide that you don't want to display that to the user. So I hope that answers the question. I understand this is about simplified data. What about adding attributes? If we have a form for developers for inputs, dev wants us to repeat a step or some content from elsewhere. Would that go in as their comments in a developer's comment section? I cannot really follow all that, I think, but attributes is one of the things that form controls bring within the interface, because before adding this, the attributes were accessible only through the attributes side panel, right? And while with this functionality, you can bind an attribute to a form control, like a date or a drop down, or Mark, do you want to add something to
Yeah,
this?
well, remember in the first form that I showed.
I can make you presenter back,
Yeah.
if you want.
Okay. So here in the sequence, before, during, and after, these checkboxes, those are actually updating attributes. So if I flip this to
or you can make the attribute side view visible on the right.
Yeah. Yeah, having trouble getting that because it's got stuff laid on top of it. But so after equals true here that's what's actually being entered when you click that box. If I go back to author view, click during, back to text, then during equals true. So I'm turning these on and off with the checkboxes. That's not the only thing you can do with them, but it just illustrates that the whole business of having the editing of attributes work differently from the editing of elements goes away in a forms-based view, because you can use the controls to update the attributes just as well as elements. So it's a distinction that authors no longer need to worry about, which is a very good thing, because it's a really hard thing to explain to authors in many cases. And why do I have to edit it differently? Why is it not working the same way? So that's a really important aspect of how the forms view hides those XML kinds of things, like having to know the difference between an element and an attribute, having to know what any of the element names are. All that kind of stuff goes away. This is why this provides a much better hiding of XML than a WYSIWYG view does, because the WYSIWYG view actually keeps on asking you questions about the elements and the element structure. Here we can hide it so much better. It's a really big advantage.
Another question, maybe I missed it, but did you show how the form is created?
We haven't shown the form creation in this. We really wanted in this webinar to focus on the business value of doing this and how this helps expand the authoring franchise within the organization. This gives you a way to have people who previously you couldn't get good structured content from. This gives you a way to do it. That's the focus here. I'm certain that George will happily set up another webinar if there's a demand to talk about the mechanics of how it's done. We also are talking about a webinar possibly on design, to show more of the different design possibilities, the different things that you can do and the different ways you can handle things with forms. So I think those are both good topics for potential upcoming webinars. And maybe the question back to the audience is, what things would you like to see us cover in this area?
Basically, there are just to bind the form, it's just adding in the content property. You can call an oxygen function that will create that form control. And for instance, to add an action, you say just button, action ID, and the name of the action. Or if you want to bind an attribute, you match on that element and you say like combo box, and then you could say edit href or that attribute, the attribute that you want to edit. So it's not anything very complex. Another question, what's the process from getting, sorry, yes.
So I was going to say, this is what's doing most of the work. This is the CSS. So there's nothing terribly complex or difficult. This isn't showing how some of the actions are done. That's a slightly different thing, but this is the sort of thing we're looking at to implement this.
What's the process for getting from an oxygen form to a web-based oxygen form? As I mentioned, we have the oxygen author is available as a component, so you can build your own application. And when you build an application, you take also the CSS that you define for when you work with the and custom actions that you define when you work in the desktop version, and you just reuse them for that application. And we provide an applet example and a desktop, a small reviewer example in our SDK. Okay. What skill set should I be looking for if I wanted to create these form views for my content? Is CSS enough? Any particular CSS version or form technology like Xforms? So as we mentioned before, this is related, is basically CSS, and Oxygen supports most of the CSS level 2 and some of the CSS level 3 functionality. And in addition to that, we have these Oxygen functions that you place in the content to create actually the form controls.
Yeah, I think we should make a distinction as far as Xforms is concerned, that Xforms is an XML standard for creating forms, whereas what we're looking here is using forms to create any XML.
I will definitely be interested in a webinar on setting up forms. We already presented, like a rough view on this functionality in a previous webinar, XML authoring for everyone, that you can also find recorded on our website. And as Mark said, it will look for feedback on exactly you would like to see on, some more real cases than the demos we already include in our samples. And then we can have a webinar to explain, how to solve your real problem with the, that's much more useful, I think. Library of forms, best practices, patterns and anti-patterns would be very nice.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what we were leaning towards with the idea of a design, forms design webinar.
Is there documentation about how to set up the forms? Mark, did you got any problem with following that?
No, it's all pretty well laid out, and it's also really good to ask questions on the Oxygen forums, mailing lists. George and the guys are just really, really responsive on that. So it's one of my favorite things about Oxygen is how easily you can get questions answered. I think maybe down the road what we want to do is tie implementation to particular design patterns. That's I think something that might be useful to have down the road.
Another question was if the source code for these samples is available or not. I can surely make available, within Oxygen there are already a number of form samples. I can also make available this quick topic example that I presented earlier, and the application that you've seen with only with no other action, just only open save and all that, is just a slightly modified version of the sample reviewer, basic reviewer that we have as part of the SDK. So basically, you have this available.
And I can certainly make my example available. Probably easiest to give it to George so he can make it available with everything else. But I can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We should and another question is, will we make the recording available? Yes, and we don't make available only the recording. For all the webinars that we presented, you have available also the sample files, the slides and the sample files that are used during the presentation. So we will make available also the recording for this webinar in a couple of days. And we still have questions, but I think we are over the time. Let me see if I can get a quick one. Will you send email notifications about the recording? Yes, we will send also email notifications when the recording is available. Okay. Is it possible to create forms in XSLT style sheets for input to parameters and attributes? I'm not sure
That might be a question to direct to one or both of us, maybe in an email afterwards, so we can parse that one. It sounds interesting, but I'm not sure what it means.
When you hovered over the writer's notes section in the author tab, a pop-up revealed the underlying element as draft comment. Is it possible to customize the pop-up so that it can provide a simplified description of the expected content rather than reveal the underlying XML element that wraps that content? Yes, that's possible. There are more ways of doing that. But you know, you can do that either at the schema level or maybe at the API level, and you can turn off these tooltips, or you can control what information is displayed within these tooltips. And in this way, we also integrated a style guide for data, but that's another discussion.
Since we still obviously have a bunch more questions,
Yeah.
maybe George, you could throw up my contact details, just so
Yes.
anybody who wants to follow up. I'm sure they know how to contact you, but if they don't know how to contact me, just throw that up for 30 seconds.
Yes, I'll do that. Let me make me presenter first. So anyway, there are a couple of questions that are not yet answered, but do not worry. We will get back to you by email, and we will answer all the questions by email after the webinar. As I mentioned, the recording will be available. You will be notified about new versions. Sorry, about when that is available. Right now we already have scheduled 2 other webinars. The next one is authoring data with Oxygen, part 2, profiling and reuse with data 1.2. Then we have the last webinar on XSLT development, debugging, profiling, and unit testing. We will be at Congility, TCOM, and Data Europe as next conferences. And here you have Mark and mine contact details. You can see the email and the Twitter IDs. And this information will be made available. You know, it will be part of the recording, and you should be able to find this also in the recording. Mark, do you want to read one more question, or we should close here?
I'm happy to take another question if people are still willing to hang on the line.
Can you look on the questions, because I cannot look at the questions in the same time we keeping this on the screen.
So the question that I'm seeing, the last question asked, is about the SDK. You mentioned the SDK. I've purchased Oxygen XML Editor, but do not see an SDK bundle in the folder. That's definitely a question for you.
That is available from our website. So if you go on our website under resources, there's here an Oxygen SDKs, and here we have author component for standalone Java Swing or based integrations. And then you can download this author component startup project that contains the source code for the reviewer, the small reviewer application, as well as the source code for the applet demo that we have. So the SDK is placed within this project, basically. And you have here also a link to the user guide that is the chapter that describes exactly this, the documentation for how you can create this kind of user interfaces and how you can customize Oxygen.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think perhaps we are now done. So
Okay.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and as I say, we'll welcome your questions, and write to either one of us or both of us, and we'll make sure we get answers.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for staying late, so many of you. Goodbye, and see you next time. Thank you, Mark. Goodbye.
Thank you, George. Bye-bye.